Let's go. And hey, everybody, welcome to the Collector Safe Space. It's your boy Dre, and today we're doing something a little bit different, but a lot closer to my heart. For those of you that don't know, I was a teacher, and I've always said this. I have the teacher mindset whenever I do anything, when I prepare for YouTube or pretty much anything I do with my channel and or the Facebook group and or the IG group. And this is a chance for me to interview a fellow educator who I've been Facebook friends with for a while now and have been following him and watching him talk on his streams about comics. And I love what he does. It's a rare opportunity to get a glimpse into teachers because we really only get our summers when we have kids of our own to enjoy something. But I see him going to the movies with his kids. I see him enjoying it. And it's obviously you could tell he's not that big a collector. I mean, look at the background of his room. You know, there's nothing there. It's like it's empty. So I'm going to introduce Mike. Mike, it's great to have you on the channel today, and I want you to just tell us a little bit about yourself before we get into the nitty-gritty fun questions.
Hey, well, thank you, Andre, for Dre, right? Should I call
Yeah,
you
you can
Dre?
call me Andre. Everybody calls me Dre, like the doctor. So
All right, Doc. So, thanks for inviting me to talk to you today. It's really cool. I am a high school English teacher. I've been teaching for 20 years, but I've been a nerd for my whole life. Big into comics and superhero books mostly these days, but I do read a lot of different graphic novels, as you can see from part of the collection behind me. I actually have more than this in my classroom library. I have thousands of graphic
nice.
novels in my library in school. That's there. This is my private personal collection. It's a lot of the same books, some stuff that I think is not necessarily appropriate for the classroom, or things I don't want to give up because I like them too much and I have to end up buying a second copy. I'm also, I dip my professional toes in a lot of different places. I am a founding member of the LitX Educational Collaborative, group of teachers from around the country. And what we do is we go to different educational shows and fan shows, like educational conferences and Comic-Cons, and we do workshops and panels on how to teach with comics. We do a lot of work with the Read Pop group, who put on New York, Chicago, C2E2, NYCC Comic-Con, out in Seattle. We've been. We also have done stuff with San Diego Comic-Con and some other shows regionally. We will be in New York this year, relaunching LitX. We're building up the group to have a lot more of an online presence, so you'd be looking out for that. I'll give the socials and everything later on when we wrap up, so you can find us online and follow us. I'm also the director of programming for Altered Reality Entertainment. And we put on, this year, we're putting on 7 Comic-Con shows. Rhode Island Comic-Con is our largest show. We are the biggest show, or one of the biggest shows, I don't know if it's official or whatnot, in New England. We have had up to 80,000 people at our shows in Rhode Island. But we did 7 shows, or in the midst of 7 shows. Right now we're working on Anime Con, which is coming up at the end of the month. We do Comic-Cons, and I do all of the scheduled programming. I run all of the main stage and secondary stage programming and fan panel programming for those shows. So I'm a pretty busy guy. I got a lot going on, especially
Yeah, you wear a lot of different hats, which I think that being a teacher has taught you very well. To when sometimes when your boss is telling you, your principal and your AP come to you and they're like, "Hey, you got to do this today," and you're like, "Okay, hat number 1, not hat number 2." I Lord knows I know. So how long you been doing this, teaching and being in education? Just curious.
I've been teaching for 20 years.
Wow, nice.
Yeah, and I right now I'm teaching, like I said, I teach high school English at a public school here in Rhode Island, and I teach senior English, and I have an elective course that I teach that I love called Modern Graphic Novel. I have 2 sections of that I've been teaching for the last couple of years, and I've got another 2 sections in the fall starting up again, where we teach comics, graphic novels, pop culture stuff, and literacy using those texts specifically.
That's amazing. My wife is she's an ELA teacher who's now pursuing her 3rd master's and a PhD eventually.
Wow, nice.
And yeah, she's my wife is an overachiever. I love her to death. And we in the time we've been together, I've introduced her to this, to using graphic novels in the classroom. And we weren't going to go to this, but part of her finishing out one of her grad classes this year is to go to a convention. We're going to be going to GalaxyCon, and we're going to be kind of building a lesson plan for if a teacher wanted to go to a comic book convention, what can they glean from that for their students? What can they actually use in their classrooms to help people that are interested or becoming interested stay interested and use that as a way of teaching? And she's been coming up with some great stuff. So have you ever done anything like that since you are part of programming for conventions?
Oh yeah, that is the meat and potatoes behind what we do for like the New York, New York Comic Con, C2E2, San Diego's. We do educational programming, panels, and workshops at those shows that are geared towards teachers and librarians, where we literally show you talk about what books are out there and how you can actually take them into your classroom and use them practically, to either to shore up existing curricula or to build new curricula around. um yeah, that's one of the big that's basically what we do at those shows. Like we've got comics 101 type panels and workshops where it's like people who've never picked up a comic book or wandering into Comic-Con with their kids and saw something educational and they thought, hey, I'm going to go see that, all the way up to like more advanced stuff for teachers that have like us grown up with comics and are using them already, offering more concepts and ideas that they can pedagogy that they can add to what they're already doing. We have some panels that actually ask the audience to be part of the conversation where they can share their ideas with us. And we do a few fun things here and there. Like one of our most popular panels that we've ever done was called Just Kill the Joker, and the idea behind it was the moral implications of why Batman never bothered to kill the Joker and how many people have died as a result of that. Is there a philosophical moral, is there a high level conversation to be had around stuff like that? We're cultivating one that I'm hoping to do this year at one of the shows, which is a conversation about what it's like to live in a world of superheroes when you're not one. What kinds of
Ooh.
how much of a hellscape would that be for someone who's just a regular person living in Metropolis, and every other day some monster is smashing up your workplace or your apartment? And how do does a normal person live in a world like that? Is it as great as we would hope it would be, or is it going to be terrifying and awful all the time? So like we try to do that. We try to mine out like more deep-seated conversations around some of the books that everybody is reading, and even the movies and stuff as well, which a lot more people are familiar with.
So guys in the chat, whenever you guys want, feel free. Whenever you ask a question, I'm gonna show it so Mike can answer it. So besides me talking with him, I'm gonna have you guys I'm gonna have my friend Carlos T3 Collects. He says, do parents of your students find it odd that this is a way of teaching?
um I have never had a parent complain about the texts that I use or the method of teaching that I use. Um, a lot of parents are like me, they're like Gen X, and they are comic people. I get a lot of students who say, "My dad wishes he had a class like this," or "My mom, collected whatever Star Wars figures when she was a kid too." And like the parents very often have been embracing the use of these texts because their kids they're reading. Doesn't matter that it's a comic. It shouldn't, reading comics is reading like anything else. So I haven't had a whole lot of resistance. I've been fortunate. I know some teachers that have, and there have been occasions where a certain book might not be received as well as another, but that's par for the course these days when it comes to education. So
the
um,
landmine, the
yeah.
landmines, folks, that we encounter as teachers. My wife and I talk about it all the time, and I know that you and I. It's funny. Like I just want to give a brief background before we even continue. Mike and I actually met through Facebook last year. I saw what he was doing, and I was super into and for those of you that know me personally, I'm a huge proponent of using graphic novels, pop cultures for engagement in the classroom. I feel like it has to be the new conversation, and it has been in the conversation, but I think it needs to become more part of what we're doing to get more student engagement. And Mike actually and I were trying to get together for C2E2 last summer. So we definitely tried it. Just things didn't pan out, but he always left an open invitation for me to, like, whenever I wanted to come work with them. So I was like, man, I got to interview him. But then time we were moving and just so much stuff was happening that I kept following him, and I'm like, man, we gotta get together. Like, I gotta go up to do something. So this is why, folks, when I bring somebody on like this, it is a personal, not just a personal treat, but it's like a, this great collaboration of hearing, someone that thinks very like-minded in the sense of what we're trying to build in the field of teaching and education as well. So I'm going to take a sidestep from education for a second and actually ask you this. What was the first comic, toy, thing that got Kid Mikey to become the nerd that he is today?
Oh, well, it's a pretty interesting story, actually. It may not have been the very first, but it was the one that is the deepest memory for me. Um, when I was 7 years old, I had a neighborhood friend. His parents were collectors; they were antique dealers, and so for a year we were like thick as thieves. We were best friends. We were all the whole year we were always together. And then they were decided that they were going to move to Philly. So they were packing up, and I was at the house while they were packing up. And I remember that their house was beautifully cluttered with amazing things that they bought at thrift shops and antiquing every weekend. So there was stuff in this house everywhere. It was glorious. My house was always pristine. My mom kept it perfectly neat, but this was like just a pastiche of old newspapers and magazines and paintings and sculptures and art and just knickknacks, things that they found. There was a piano bench that I never saw anyone play the piano because there were stacks of newspapers on the piano bench. Well, they had cleared the room and the piano bench had been cleared, and they were in the piano bench. So, you could open those piano benches. People used to store things inside. And my friend's father called me over and said, Michael, come here. I want to show you something. And he opened it, and he pulls out of this piano bench Superman #1. And he took it out of a little plastic case and he put it into my hands. And he opened it, and he was flipping through this ancient book from the 1930s or 40s, whatever it was. It wasn't Action Comics #1, which would have been a whole other thing. It was
That would have
Superman
been
#1. And still an incredibly valuable and milestone book. And I was just amazed at this. And his mom creeped up behind me and whispered in my ear, "You're going to remember this for the rest of your life." And I did. And from that point on, I sought out superhero books. I would go to the local library, and there was a a shelf in the back where they had the trade paperbacks of the classic Marvel and DC books, like those old first run Fantastic Four from the 60s, the Avengers. And I would just sit there and read those books in the stacks all afternoon long. I was kind of a quiet little, squirrely little reader kid. From that point on, I just loved graphic novels, cartoons, comic strips, comic books. So that's the story there. And it's
that warms my heart, man, because I think every single person that's a collector and or has ever been influenced by any sort of superhero comic book thing has always had that sort of story. Like, I think mine was my uncle, who is a retired New York City cop. Now, we were when we were living. My parents were getting divorced, and I remember I wanted to go see the new Batman movie with Michael Keaton. So obviously, we're sitting in the 40s. I'm in my late 40s. I'm in my mid 40s now. So I was like, all right, my uncle's like, hey, let's go see it. So we had this little like rinky dinky theater by the train station, and it was right in the Bronx. And I'm like, all right, we went and saw it, and I was gobsmacked. I was like, oh my God, like, this is amazing. Like, who is this crazy evil villain, the Joker? Like, why is, like, I eventually grew to love Jack Nicholson and Michael Keaton and Kim Basinger and all the actors in that movie, as well as the soundtrack is amazing to it as well. But I think that experience in the theater is what like drew me. Like, same with Star Wars and all that sort of fandom. So I love it. Now there's one of my friends here, Colin, Easy Collecting. My son's teachers told me that it's really good that my 8-year-old son was reading comics for his reading assignments. Now I'm going to comment, and then I'm going to throw this to Mike. I have my daughter, who's a teenager, and my son just graduated high school and he's going to college. And my daughter, who's 13, she reads manga, she reads comic books. Um, she's she also loves to read books. Like she's just that kind of book nerd. Like that's what she does. And some teachers, because she's AIG. So for those of you that don't know, she's like an advanced reader. Like she reads at pretty much like a collegiate level now. She she likes to read them, but if we were to say, does she read them for homework assignments? She doesn't. But that's also because she's 13. Mike, for you, would you let students in the class when as an ELA teacher? My wife does it. Do you let students read like as a preferred medium if they can't read, like, say, the Diary of Anne Frank, and you have the book in your classroom, the graphic novel for that? Would you let them read that, which is very similar to the actual text? Or do you say, no, you need to read the book and then I gift you like the graphic novel if you can finish the book?
Well, it depends. We have a approved an approved curriculum in my district that we have to use. So there are some things that students, it's part of the curriculum that we have to find creative ways around. So for the Diary of Anne Frank, I might have them read them simultaneously or excerpts from the book along with, and I do have two different versions of the graphic novel version of the Diary of Anne Frank in my library. So I would be amenable as long as, and the books that I have, I would consider pretty faithful to the original text. And as long as the themes and the message of the text isn't lost in the adaptation, I don't see a problem with, kind of scaffolding the plain text, the original text, with something that's a graphic novel adaptation. So, and I haven't had a lot of resistance from administration or my department head regarding this. I've had encouragement on, however we can get these themes and these skills taught, even if the text isn't, the original, prose text. So I would say, yeah, I think I would do that. As long as it's not like a space age version, an adaptation that's not,
Of course.
a straight up adaptation. Like, for example, I do have the manga classics, graphic novel versions, manga versions of classic literature, which are unabridged, especially the Shakespeare. So that
Mhm.
is an option, where they're reading the Shakespeare. It's the same. It's just it's a manga version of that Shakespearean
Which is
book.
dope.
Yeah.
I
So
love those. I've seen those. They're amazing. Like I saw that they just recently did the Count of Monte Cristo.
oh, that's
I
yeah.
mean,
They've got a
I
dozen or more than a dozen different titles out there, and they're fantastic. The kids love them.
and I think that for me, I mean, as a horror fan, I love Junji Ito. So I know that he just did Frankenstein about, what was it, a year or so ago,
Yep.
and I've been wanting to read that because I heard that pretty much anybody that's in education says that it is the exact Mary Shelley, like just in manga form.
Yeah.
So I definitely have to check that out.
Some
We
of the
did have
quotes
another question as well.
go ahead.
So it says from Carlos, what comic runs wouldn't you have in your curriculum?
Hmm. That's a tough one. As the curriculum is one thing and the library is another. The library is there for pleasure reading, not assignment reading necessarily, although we do use it in the graphic novel class for self-selected where they can pick whatever they want. So the curriculum has to be approved. And again, like I said, my curriculum for the English classes is a curriculum that has already been kind of approved and required by the district. So there are some books in that curriculum that are graphic novels. Those are the ones I kind of have to stick to. As far as my graphic novel class goes, the books have to be approved through my administration. Like anything else, you can't just decide you're going to teach a book. It has to go through a process. It has to be approved through the principal, the school, sometimes the school committee. Not always, but most of the time. There's multiple eyes on whatever it is I choose. What wouldn't I bring? I mean, there are some books that I wouldn't teach because while I enjoy reading them, I don't know that there's necessarily an inherent educational value in every single book behind me here. I don't know. I don't want to single out any individual titles because, again, I wouldn't discourage any teachers from looking at those books themselves and deciding themselves. They may come up with a different Yeah, yeah. The Walking Dead, there's nudity. There's a lot of heavy duty violence in it. Um, so yeah, I don't know that I would teach the Walking Dead book. I do love reading it. Robert Kirkman is amazing.
Yeah,
And the book, and not just that book, but like Invincible, which I have somewhere behind me.
love Invincible. Yeah, I see it up on the top shelf.
There behind me, I have the entire, all three of the omnibus editions. I don't have that in my classroom library. Um, I wouldn't hand those to a kid and then put an assignment along with it, Um, so, like I said, you have to kind of distinguish between, and I don't have time to teach every book anyway. So I pick a lot of the books that I feel have thematic messages that I can build across my curriculum. Some classics, like we do a manga classic version of Romeo and Juliet, is one of the books we choose. We do some nonfiction stuff uh like They Called Us Enemy by George Takei. That was one I just added
Great book.
to my classroom. I have a classroom set of those. Mouse obviously is one that I have taught many times over. Persepolis, then there's others that are like fantasy, uh, like like American Born Chinese, which is one that the students really like. I Kill Giants is one of my all-time favorite graphic novels, and I
Oh, that's
teach
a great
that.
book.
I've gotten to be friendly with Joe Kelly, who wrote the book, and he Skypes my students every year and answers questions about the book in the
Nice.
process. So I don't know. I don't know that there's necessary. I wouldn't necessarily say don't ever teach this book because, again, I'm only one teacher. I have one opinion, and I'm one series of experiences. So someone may go, no, I could teach The Walking Dead. I use this scene or this book or this volume and this sequence to teach this thing, and it could be really cool. So just because I may not do it or may not consider it doesn't mean it doesn't work. That's an important point. If you don't mind me kind of going off just for a
Go
minute,
ahead. Go
like,
ahead. This is your show. I'm just
no,
living it right now.
it's yours.
I'm just living it.
One of the things that LitX has tried to do since we started is everybody that's ever been part of our organization or been on one of our panels is considered part of the group. We're just a collective of a cohort, if you will, of educators. So what we feel has been really important is that we want to make sure that new voices are always being introduced into the things that we do. That's how I met you, Dre, right? Like I put it out on Facebook, on a Facebook group for teachers. I said, we're going to be in Chicago. We're looking for some new teachers to join us on panels, workshops. If you're interested, let us know. Because we just try to find people that have ideas that are different than ours. We're not the only voices in education and comics and education. It's a very small pond. There's a lot of people out there that are doing similar work to us, and we want to hear from each other because we learn from one another. And there are new people out there that don't know how to get onto a panel or to build out a workshop and offer it to people what to do. So we try to kind of open the door for as many teachers as we can. I'm of the mind that we've been lucky because we worked, for the last 15, 10, 12 years, I would say, we've been working with Read Pop and trying to build a relationship with them so that we could be trusted by them to do educational programming. And we have been over the years. And what we've decided is to step back off of our own panels very often to bring more voices in. I'm of the mind we're educators. We're not going to be famous doing this. That's not the goal, right? Teachers aren't we're not celebrities. The goal is for us to share any spotlight we get. So if that light is shining on us and we're like, oh, wow, we've got 8 panels in New York or whatever, we don't want to keep all the panels for ourselves. It's the same voice over and over again. We want to shine that light onto other teachers and invite them to either join us or supplant us on those panels so that they can deliver new information that we can learn from, as well as people who may have already seen our shtick, and know what we're up to. So that's the thing. Like when you're a teacher, what I feel is most important is not to make your voice the loudest in the room, but to amplify the voices around you. And that's one thing we've tried very hard to continue to do. So that's why we hope, Dre, that you're able to join us soon.
I
In
will
Chicago,
gladly. Like
maybe
I said, that's something that you've extended that invitation. Don't think I've ever not wanted to do it. I am 100% on board. you and I will be working together more in a collaborative nature, in face to face, as well as on through Instagram or YouTube, whatever we can do, because I've been doing this by myself with only and I don't want to say like, oh, like woe is me, more like I like the fact that it started out as an idea for me in my classroom when I started first teaching middle school 6th grade social studies. And like, the more I got into being in my own classroom and the more I started being more myself, because I remember the teacher mentor I had said to me, it's like, Dre, you are a great personality. You know what you're doing. Use what you love. He's like, stop trying to teach the curriculum and teach what you love, using what you love to get the curriculum across. And I was like, yeah, but there's hurdles. He's like, screw the hurdles. You could do. He's like, jump the hurdles, do it. He's like, if not, go around them, figure it out. And I did. And in my district here in Union County, when I was still working for Union County, I taught workshops. I did 2 workshops, one at my school, one at the county level, to teach 53 different schools how to do what we do with graphic novels and pop culture in the classroom. I've done 4 shows: Oak City Comic Con, Raleigh SuperCon. I've done 2 other North Carolina comic book things. So it took years for me to get comfortable in not just knowing the book knowledge of it, because I didn't want to be that teacher that's like, hey, I'm going to go up there and just start spouting knowledge and talking in what my friends call teacher speak. Because as teachers, we have teacher speak, and then we have what we regularly, how we use it. So I had to marry the 2. And that took, God, I want to say that took at least 10 years to now that I'm pretty comfortable that I can talk about comics with anybody and still be able to marry. My wife says I can marry the pedagogy and the educational stuff into it. And I mean, being with a teacher that teaches ELA, that's pursuing her doctorate to help use it and be like a literacy coach, is an amazing outlet for me, because I can bounce ideas off of her. But she also is not into comic books heavily. She likes them, but she's not into them. So to work with people like yourself and get to collaborate, it's always a fun thing. And my friend Carlos said to get on it. What do you think I've been doing, trying to get people onto the show to work like this so we can collaborate to do these things?
Well,
So
you're invited. We're going to be in Chicago. We'll be in New York. Looks like we're still working on that, figuring out what we're going to do. But we're going to be at C2E2 because we do it every year. Most of the cohort is in Chicago. Most of the other people that I work with are there, so that's like our home base in a way. Even though I'm on the East Coast, so I know that's, I think, one of the closer places to you. So keep those dates open and figure out if you can get down there, because we'd love to have you join us on a panel or workshop.
I would love to
help us pitch something. If you have an idea, we're happy to pitch your idea with you could do it on your own if you want to, and if you'd like.
No, I'd rather work with you guys. I mean, to be honest, I'd rather work with you guys, because I feel like there's a lot of missed opportunity down here, because we have my wife noticed it too, because she, like I said, she's been planning something with her classes and doing what she's doing for our daughter on the 28th of July this month. But I would love the opportunity to have more people interested in doing more stuff here in the panels down in, like, I don't want to call it the Bible Belt, but we are the Bible Belt down here. I'm not from here. I'm from New York originally, as you know. You couldn't tell my cadence and my drawl. But North Carolina, Atlanta, South Carolina, and Georgia, Florida, those areas are huge in the desire to have people like talk about this stuff, but there's not a lot of people educated enough to want to come out and do it.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then my friend Colin says I have to come to C2E2.
Yeah,
well, dude, I will try to put that on my list for next year, because my wife and I were talking about it. There are some conventions we would like the bigger ones to go to take our children to. So next year, that's a definite. Mm-hmm. And as far as, New York City Comic Con, I haven't been to a New York City Comic Con since I was 11 or 12 years old. So I would love to go now. I know that their badges are pretty much like almost all sold out already, if they're not sold out. So that's like a miss.
If we do panels there and we find one that you feel like is a good fit for you, you'll get a badge. So that's something to keep in mind.
And New York is not that much of a hard step for me. That's like a drive or a flight. So
yeah.
you asked me to do that, I can try to
Well,
get up there for
we'll
that.
know soon, hopefully, what, if anything, we're going to do in New York. And like I said, we're love to have you join us or lead a panel on your own without us. Like I said, we want to step. We usually, if we get 4 or 5 panels in a show or more, we try only to do one each, and then try to bring as many other teachers on board and creators. Like we've worked with tons of creators who are creator educators or are writing or drawing the books that we teach. So that's another kind of like outlet. That's one thing as an educator that your audience, anybody that is interested or teachers are interested in Comic-Con, like, what do you do at a show? Yeah, I saw the panels, but then what? Now I've got this whole weekend. You hang in the artist alley and you meet the artists that are, that are either established or up and coming, who are writing books, and they have them on their tables. You can buy them that you could bring to your classroom library and give them some exposure. That's how we've met some artists that have gone on to do amazing things, like Colleen Venable, aka Venable, who did she's got Katie and the Cat Sitter series right now that's doing very well. And we've also that's where we met Christina Steens, who's a close friend of ours, who won several awards for a book she did called Archival Quality. I've met that's where I met Joe Kelly, who wrote I Kill Giants. We've had the opportunity, and over the years working the shows, I've met like Chris Claremont and Neil Adams. Rest in peace, Neil. I met Stan Lee, through the Comic Cons and stuff. So you can get into those artist alleys and meet the next big artist, like Raina Tegelmeyer. Everybody knows Smile. Everybody's read Smile or knows what that book is. I met Raina at a small press expo before Smile came out. So she and I have known each other for many years. And when we get a chance to, she jumps on panels with us. And it's a pretty big deal. She's one of the biggest artists out there. So you, as an educator, can meet these young artists that are up and coming, and they'll build relationships, especially if they're local. You're local to that region, even if it's a smaller show. You may be local to like the Baltimore area or Denver or wherever you are. You go to that local show, you meet those local artists, you bring their book to your classroom, and then they'll come and visit your school and talk to your students. Like this is the advantage of Comic-Con. It's not just, well, I'm going to sit and watch 5 people talk about something. I'm going to go out and I'm going to meet artists and creators, and it's great. There's the other stuff. There's the fun Comic-Con stuff.
Oh yeah, like
Meeting
for the geeks, for us geeks and nerds, there's like, yeah, you can go love all the other stuff, but I have to agree with you because my wife. So back in 2019, obviously pre-pandemic, my wife and I took our daughter to took her to GalaxyCon for her first convention.
Very cool.
And it was fun. It was like Lana's never gone, and she was still like in elementary school at that point, so she had not gone into middle school yet. So we're like, okay, so she's running around loving all this stuff, and my wife actually got to go onto the dealer's room floor. Now, GalaxyCon is interesting how it's shaped, because like the front of the con has a lot of literacy like authors that want to put their book out there. So my wife got, she loves to read, so she's going over to these guys' bookshelves and like looking at their stuff, and they start talking. Lo and behold, one of the authors was like, "Hey, can I get your information? I want to Skype into your classroom." And lo and behold, he's like, "Oh, the next book I write, I want to name it after your daughter, your daughter Lana." And I was like, "Awesome! Like this is so cool." Like my wife it's funny because my wife is so timid and quiet, but to see her like network like that, I was like, that's awesome. So yeah, he's right, dude. You guys go to these things, and any advice I can give to anybody that goes to these things, even if you're there for a day and you go with your kids and you're an educator, just take a second to walk through the artist alley. Walk through the comic creator alleys. Like I'm gonna see Clayton Crane, who I am a huge fan of his artwork, and I have Spider-Geddon to get signed by him. So I was like, you know what? I was like, how much does he charge? I was like, is he going to charge me a lot of money to get the book signed? And they're like, no, he has like 5 free books you can get signed. So I was like, oh my goodness, I'm going to talk to this dude. Like, I want to hit him up and ask him questions. And then I figured, I was like, well, Lana's going to be there. You like drawing. Why don't you ask him, like, how do I get started in doing this? Like, you're a kid that's into manga style. Does manga style translate well to the American industry. I mean, sometimes that's a whole argument people can have nowadays, but that's stuff that we're trying to promote, like push her to get out of her comfort zone. But it's also a great way for us to network with them. And
Mhm.
a lot of the times they are very, very welcoming, unless they're in a bad mood and not selling well, and then they're going to be pissed off and hate you. So,
Yeah.
but that's that.
In
So
yeah, in the
go ahead.
bigger shows, I spend most of my time in the artist alley. I mean, yeah, I love the vendor aisles is great. You know, I collect some pops, so sometimes I'm on the lookout for the one. Try to leave, make sure I don't leave without that one grail that I've been looking for. But the artist alley is where I spend 90% of my non-panel time in those shows. The C2E2's got a huge artist alley. New York is like a football field sized artist alley, and Seattle's my favorite, the West Coast artists.
Wait, is that Emerald City
Emerald City.
or
Yeah, the Emerald City show, which I haven't been to in a while. I did it a couple of years in a row, and then it's the pandemic and traveling became harder and more expensive. But there is a Florida SuperCon, which just happened.
yes?
That is read as well. We're looking maybe to do something with that at some point if they want educational programming there. We would love
That's
to
a
do
short
it.
drive for me. That's a 8 what was it, 6 hour, 7 hour drive for me.
And who doesn't want a vacation in Florida for a few days in the summer?
Facts. Well, no, the heat. It's that heat that'll
Yeah,
get
it's a
you.
little rough in July, but I've never been to Florida SuperCon, so I wouldn't mind giving it a shot. But I mean, who knows? Like there's so much opportunity for educators at shows like those. Like we said, and if you're a fan too, your teacher, sure, but if you're a fan, like you want to meet William Shatner or whoever's headlining the show, you get the chance to do that too. That's the side bit of my the non-teachery side of my work with Con when I work for Altered Reality, is I have met so many celebrities over the years. Because I run the main stage, where the big panels happen. So I'm backstage and getting them ready and getting them on stage and stuff. So that's kind of a little kind of like childhood dream. You didn't think I would grow up some one day to meet Lando Calrissian or, standing right next to, Dr. Frankenfurter, or, Williams, Captain Kirk. I met George Takei, had a wonderful conversation with him about teaching. He was excited when he heard I was a teacher. And how thrilled he was. He and his husband Brad, that I would put his book in my classroom, and he mentioned me on stage. I mean, these are little moments that I've had because I've been lucky enough to have gotten this opportunity to do this work. That sometimes blends and bleeds into that education side of it too, So you can go to the show and have fun, but you can also have your teacher hat on for some of it, and just encourage you, if you are a teacher and you are going to these shows and you are going to Artist Alley, buy in Artist Alley. Support them. These local artists, this is how they make their living, and the books are stuff that you may not see in a Barnes and Noble, or your local comic shop is another place to go. They can give you the line on what's good, new books, and local artists that are selling through them as well. So support your local artists, especially at the shows and at the local comic shops. And like I said, they'll be willing more often than not to at least to zoom into your class, if not come to your class if they're local. I've had people visit my classroom digitally and in person, and kids always love talking to professionals that are out there making books.
Oh,
Create.
especially with the fact that now with all this technology we have in the classroom, that you can bring stuff in. So I want to ask you a question that I think a lot of educators are male, female, whatever. I'm never one to. This channel is not political in any way. Sort of like we don't have any leniencies like that. But what do you feel about representation for in your classroom? I know for me as and I've said this before, and I know people say I always get on a soapbox for this, but I don't. Um, I feel like representation in pop culture media, and I'm going to say that across the board, from manga to comics to movies to TV shows, helps kids, especially the generation now that is heavily influenced by the media. If they see it and they relate to it, it helps them want to learn more. Do you agree with that? And has that ever been a stumbling block for you to, work with that sort of, like you said, because some stuff is could be considered taboo. Like, we don't mention, anything about, the LGBTQ plus, community. down, especially down here, you really can't, because it's like looked on negatively. And I was always curious, like, is that something up north that's a typical hurdle for you guys, and how do you overcome that?
Well, obviously, representation is important. And yes, I live in the Northeast in a blue state. And while politics does not enter into my classroom, like I don't proselytize about politics to my students.
Hmm.
I don't reveal who I voted for or anything like that. You know, kids will ask. I teach seniors and juniors, so there are kids that are close to voting age, if not voting age, who are curious about politics, but it's not the place for it. And we have to choose our words carefully as educators. We don't want to be a accused of or b actually indoctrinating kids, trying to sway them politically or religiously or socially or morally. However, I don't, I have not had resistance to the titles that I've chosen. I have curated my library and the choices of books that I have put forth to be considered for curriculum-based instruction. I've been as clear as I can about the nature of the books, and I do have a diverse group of books that I teach and that I include, which does include members of the BIPOC community, members of the LGBTQIA community. I have students that are gay, that are trans, that are queer. I have students, that are various ethnicities, races, religions. So I try to at least offer up, while I may not teach every one of the books, we can't anyway, you don't have the time or the money to buy them all, but I do offer the stories of people that are not like the students that are reading them. I mean, that has always been for me my philosophy about why reading is important, what the meaning of life really is. It's stories. We tell stories. I've told how many stories, you've told how many stories just in this 40-minute conversation we've had so far, right? So how do we learn about another person? How do we get as close to being in their shoes as we can? We can't understand what it's like to be somebody that we're not, right? However, we can read the personal stories or the fictionalized stories of people who are not like us. Maybe I'll understand a little bit more about what it's like to be a Muslim teen girl if I read, Ms. Marvel, or if I understand what it was like to be a Japanese child who was interred in, camps, Japanese internment camps during World War II. If I read They Called Us Enemy, that's the only way I can really get into the head and the heart of the people that are not like me. And I think that goes a long way towards building understanding between people. You don't know what it's like to be gay or trans. Read a book about that. Read a book about a fictional character or a real character who is gay or trans. I think that it doesn't have to be as heavy as we're going to sit down and have a deep conversation about these things, but here, just experience this person's story from their own words, from their own mind, their own experiences, or like I said, a fictionalized version, because most stories come from a place of truth, even
Of
if they
course.
are fiction, right? So I believe strongly in representation in my classroom. I believe in representing marginalized groups, minority groups, writers, artists, characters across the board, and I take pride in the amount of diversity that I've put into my classroom library and the book choice, the books that I choose, and the curriculum that we have approved. There is some teacher choice in how and what texts we deliver that way as well. And I very often will choose, as often as I can, stories that are about people who are not like everybody else. I mean, that goes both ways, right? Like I can give a Black Panther book to a student that's not Black, or I can give a book about, a Chinese superhero to a Black student. Like every kid can read something that isn't them. You are who you are, but there are people that aren't who you are. If
Oh
that makes
no,
sense, right?
dude, you're 100% right. And for me, who's growing up a minority, I grew up in New York, and I was one of like three Hispanic kids in my private school. Then I went to high school. I was one of four who was an athlete. Then I went to college. It was completely different. Like I saw more and more and more. And then it's like I began to travel. My parents traveled with me when I was younger, and then I traveled as I got older. And I think that one thing as a girl dad, I have a son who's older, but I do have two girls, and one of the things I think for me is I want them to see superheroes that relate to them, as well as that I can see something positive coming out of it. Like I don't know if you're reading DC right now, that they're doing like that whole new like kind of reboot on the superhero. Like they're introducing all those new superheroes as part of that Night Terrors
Yeah.
storyline, which is amazingly great. Those all those heroes like City Boy, Vigil, I forgot the other one. There was like, and they're like, one girl looks like she's like the little girl, and it stands out to me when I bring this topic up because I loved it. Was a little girl. She's Asian, and she's like, oh, Gege or JJ, and it's like they said translation from Korean as an older brother or older sister because the little girl couldn't tell what the character was, male or female. And I thought that was huge because if you said this 20 years ago, we wouldn't have seen this in a comic book. 30 years ago, you probably wouldn't have seen it. Like the fact we even saw 20 years ago, we saw North Star. That was like the huge news. North Star was the first like openly gay character. And then like suddenly people are like, no, there wasn't. Like, hey, hands up. Like there's so many characters that have like been that way. And I'm like, no, now we're backtracking. I know we have to do a lot of that. But I think that for me, and I love hearing an English teacher say it, because as a social studies teacher, I look at it from the different angles of like how historically we need to make this fit. Like I can take George Takei's book and make it fit. I can take American Gaijin, and make that fit. But when you start messing around with things that are very close to home, you start like I know I stepped on a lot of toes, and my boss didn't like that. I was a habitual stepper. So my boss was like, "No, you can't say that." I'm like, "Well," I'm like, "Okay, but then how do you get these kids that see this in the media and relate to it?" Like I had kids that were trans that and kids that were queer and kids that were gay that wanted to know more about this stuff. And as you said, I can't indoctrinate anybody because I won't. They're not my personal children. Like my kids, I can tell because they're mine. I can tell them with my wife, hey, these are the stuff, and we're pretty liberal. My wife said it best. She's like, I'm pretty liberal in what we let our kids read. But would you, as a teacher, we have to watch those bounds. So I respect a lot of what you just said. I think that it hits a special place in my heart.
Well, like I said, I won't be teaching. I can't teach, what it's gender ideology. I mean, except in that how it relates to literature, like a movement, like the queer. If we taught queer theory, not that I have, but like if I could couch it in something educational, I would. If it's part of the curriculum that's already been approved, but it's not my place to teach a kid who they are and how to be who they are, as much as some teachers may want to be there in that way for their students. There's too much debate about that right now. And, parental involvement is not something to be ignored, and we certainly can't supersede. So it just becomes, you have to be as professional as you can when you approach these topics, if you approach them. What I will often do is if I have a book that I think, may have those themes in it, something religious or something gender-based or something, race-based, whatever, I will make it clear to the class that, if there's a student who they themselves or the parents would not want them to read or watch or listen to or whatever this text, that they would, have an alternative options as well. So kids always have an out. No one's forced. Like I don't say you all have to read this book or else you fail. Like, we have to build that in there as well. It is the responsible professional thing to do in the modern age of teaching, for where we are right now. We have to stick to the script sometimes. And I will always keep certain books available to students to borrow. That's on them. They won't be tied into their grade, which can, make things a little bit easier. So if the kid has the book, they didn't have it because I handed it to them. They have it because they found it and they decided they wanted to read it.
I love it.
If the book becomes a problem, and then we deal with those things when they happen. I like I said, I curate my library carefully to make sure there's nothing that I deem inappropriate. There have been occasions where certain books have been, I've been asked not to include them. Most of the time I've already made that decision. But we just, I have a job to do, and I am, I report back to my department head. I report to my principal. I report to my superintendent, my school committee. And ultimately, when those decisions come down, I honor them because that's my job,
Yeah, whether we like it or not. And I think that that's become more of a humbling thing for me because I have to admit, I turn 45 next Tuesday. And one of the things that's very, very humbling in my time away from the classroom was my wife brought it up to me. And she was like, you need to sometimes realize that even if they say no, just find a workaround that still lets you talk about it, but not put it in you're not hurting anybody and you're not hurting your career.
Yeah.
So that's something that was I'm glad that she was my sounding board for that, you know. But oh, here's my co-host Dave. Dave, thank you, Dave. I appreciate you. He is an awesome guest, bro. Trust me. I love when I get to have these deep conversations with people because the internet age has allowed us to do this sort of fun stuff. So I love it.
Mhm.
So I got to pick your brain on something a lot less teachery now.
Okay.
So I have to ask you. Oh wait, let me before I see this here. We're gonna post what Cobweb Collector said. Which okay, so funny story about this guy. I met him on Saturday, doing a live through another friend's Q&A that they were interviewing me, and I said, "Dude, are you a Spider-Man collector?" He's like, "No, this is my name, Cobweb. It's his name." So I think that's very cool. So he says, "I've been coming across more teachers here on YouTube. It's cool that youth has educators like yourselves. Well, we appreciate that, dude. Trust me, we're that generation that I think is gonna fade out." Um, I did tell my wife briefly the story. And Mike, I haven't told you this, but I'll tell you the story. Um, I was at my local comic shop, and a mom was in there with her son, and the mom was African American, and the son was, he just turned 18. He graduated. He was going to UNC Greensboro, or no, Pembroke. That's where he's going, UNC Pembroke, and he wanted to become an educator. So one of the guys at the shop, he's a teacher and he's a band teacher. So we start talking, and then I said, "Hey, can I offer your son some advice?" I said, "I love that." I said, "I'm Puerto Rican. I want to be able to impart some knowledge to him, if that's okay with you." And the son walked over to me, and with like a gleam in his eye, like it was like he was waiting for for me to like say that, and I was like, "Dude, be you. You love comics. You love toys. Bring that to the classroom. You will absolutely never realize the impact you will have on kids that they see you human and realize that you love this stuff. It's like you now have a new way to teach the kid, male, female, whatever. They will want to learn from you. I have students that to this day still are friends with me and remember. They're like, "Yeah, man, I remember when you were teaching us science and you brought up like manga. Like, I don't even know what manga is, but I remember you made it fun." And I'm like, that's what's awesome. Like that to me is what those moments. But I appreciate you guys for saying that. So I want to hit Mike with some fun lot like non so teachery questions.
Right.
So I gotta ask, top 3 can be from any company, favorite superheroes.
Okay. Captain America has always been my favorite, and I don't know why. I just always loved Cap. I was probably the only person to cheer in the audience when the trailer for the 1990s Captain America came on. Movie never went to
Oh,
any.
we're talking about that on my YouTube show with Dave.
Yeah.
We have a podcast, Dave and I together, and we're talking about that this week. So if you want, I'll link you to that so you can watch that.
Sure, I will. Yeah. So I'm a huge fan, particularly the MCU version of the Cap. I think they did him dirty at the end of Endgame. I don't think he would have quit being a hero just to get a selfish marriage. And I'm glad he got his happy ending, but Cap
Hell
would
yeah.
have
Although I kind of would have said the same thing. I would have kind of left to go back into 40s.
Down to have stopped being a hero throughout this, all the way up to from the 40s to the 90s to the 2000s or whatever. But Captain America, that's a tough one. Superheroes. I'm a big fan of Invincible, as you can see. I love that book. And I've always liked Longshot from the X-Men.
Really?
I dug his name and I dug his power, that he was just kind of a lucky dude. I actually have a Longshot action figure that I've had since the 90s that's in my classroom. Though he doesn't do a whole lot these days, and I doubt we'll see him anytime soon in the MCU or anything, but I've always kind of dug Longshot. I don't know. And I guess Swamp Thing is up there too. I love the Alan Moore run of Swamp Thing, which I have the hardcover trades behind me.
Actually, do you like the Lemire run currently
I have.
that they're doing?
I don't read current, but I read trades because I can't afford and/or store floppy comics. So I'm not a
I know.
issue by issue collector. I will read the trades as they drop. That's kind of how I get caught up on those new books. So I usually have to wait 6 to 8 months before I read what people are reading in the shops now. Unfortunately, like I've got this kind of, as you can't tell, I've got an obsessive personality. When I get into something, I start to spend too much money on it. So I'll end up with stacks of long boxes that I don't have room to store if I start collecting comics. I used to when I was younger, but now I just don't.
Oh
I don't have
no,
the space. So
I
I buy.
understand you.
Yeah, I get the trades, all this stuff.
So if you get the chance, dude, if you can find this at a local shop, this is
Oh,
they're magazine
right,
style.
okay.
So Jeff Lemire, I love Jeff Lemire. He did Sweet Tooth.
Yeah, I know Jeff Lemire very well. Yeah.
I love his stuff. I love horror. This is probably one of the best things I've read of his. It got me to like Lemire. So it's like Swamp Thing in a post-apocalyptic world where the Green left, and his brother has stepped up to be like the anti-Green, the Apocalypse.
Oh,
And
cool.
like it's this 3-book series. It literally took a year for them to go from book 1 to book 2 and 3.
Wow.
So I got these and I had to pre-order them through my shop. They're $6.99 a piece. They're black label, so they're a little bit of language. These would be more for your personal collection, but they're great books. So I strongly suggest this to you.
If they put them all out in a hardcover trade, I'm there. I'll buy it.
If I see it at GalaxyCon, I will text you so we can figure out if you want me to get it for you. But
sure.
So okay, so now that I know your top those are some of the heroes, which are good choices.
Okay.
What is your top 3 graphic novels you're reading right now?
Oh, right now, my God, my stack. I don't have it down here. It's upstairs. My current stack. Top 3 I'm reading right now. Well, like I said, I don't read issue by issue. So
that's what I said, graphic novel collection. That's why I'm going through the collection.
I recently found and read, I had never read it before, Planet Hulk and World War Hulk.
Awesome books.
By Greg Pak. Interesting story about him in a minute, but I had never read the books. I knew the story and I read them, and it was those books were amazing. I reviewed one on my TikTok, and I will review the other one, I think, in the next day or so. That is great. Greg Pak, I had the opportunity to meet before he even wrote a single comic. Back in the early 2000s, when I was working for the Rhode Island International Film Festival, he did a short film or a feature-length film he directed and wrote called Robot Stories that won an award at our show. And I got to meet this guy, Greg Pak, who did this amazing movie. Next thing I know, the dude is like becoming one of the most prolific comic writers in the history, and he's writing some of the biggest stories. So that's one. I've been reading a lot of diary comics, and I just picked up Julia Wertz's new book. She's like a small press person who's done a lot of stuff. She just did a book called Drinking at the Movies, which I just finished, and now I'm reading her next book, which unfortunately the name is escaping me right now. It's about her alcohol recovery story, and it's like a very interesting cartoonish style, and she's very funny, but she's also irreverent. So I've been reading that, Julia Wertz, if you're interested. And then
I'll definitely check that out.
What did I just finish? We just read. Where is
it? I know you talked about Spider-Punk, which I thought was very cool.
I have been. I mean, it's not. I don't know if it's my favorite stuff that I've been reading, but I have been reading a lot of Spider-Verse stuff, trying to kind of get caught up on those stories. I like to buy books that I know my students want to read because they're watching the movies or television shows, and then they want more of that same story. So I'll when She-Hulk came out, I bought a bunch of She-Hulk books, and so I picked up all these Spider-Verse books, and I read Edge of Spider-Verse and End of Spider-Verse back to back, which were mostly Neil Slott, I think, who wrote most of those. Those have been really fun to read. They're easy, lighthearted stories that are like, goofy and great art and stuff. So I've been digging on that stuff. One of the more recent books, I don't think it's here. I think I brought it to school. Um, that I read was Frizzy. It's a YA graphic novel, and I want to get the name of the author. Um, it was by Clarabelle Ortega, and it's about a little girl. She's Latina, good little girl who has like a lot of trouble with her hair, which is a thing that I guess some Latina girls have trouble with their hair. You know, it's
Yes.
hard to
If you're,
manage.
I'll be honest with you. If you're not Puerto Rican, if you're Puerto Rican but you're mixed Puerto Rican, so like if you're like, I don't want to be rude, but I'm gonna say naps. If you have like naps in your hair, that's sometimes what you got to deal with. And obviously, I have none, but I know I have cousins that their hair was very thick and it would frizz out.
Yeah.
So yes, I
It's
understand that.
basically about a little girl. She's like a middle school age girl who's just fighting with her hair constantly, and her mother fighting with her mother about how to take care of it and not try to straighten it and not embrace the curls. It was a story like we talked about earlier about someone that's nothing like me. I'm not a little Latina girl. I'm not. I'm not. So I
You're
don't know
not.
what that's like. No,
I
I'm not.
swear, I
So
thought you did.
reading that story from the perspective of this author and this little girl who may have been an avatar for her as a child, and her connection with her family, her mother and her aunt, and how both the mother and aunt have very different ideas about how what's presentable in terms of her hair. You think it's a really deep and impactful story that I really loved. And if you said you're a girl mom, a girl dad, I would say grab that for your have it for your kids to read as well as you. I think you could get a lot out of that story. Even
I
you know,
already put it up on my Amazon. I already have it pulled up. When you said it, I was like, this looks interesting. So definitely, and it got an Eisner Award nomination too.
yeah,
So
it did, and it also I'm a judge, a juror for the Excellence in Graphic Literature Awards out of Denver every year, and that was one of the top in our category. I was on the middle grade category this year, so that was one of my favorite books of this round. So, and I think it won one of the awards for the EGLs as well. So, yeah, so those are some of the books I'm reading now. I've got, like I said, I've got stacks and stacks and stacks of books. I buy more books than I could possibly ever read in a lifetime, so I have to try to stay alive long enough to read through everything. But I keep getting more. Like I see a new book come out and I grab it, and then it goes to the pile somewhere, and it's I don't know, man. It's
that's my wife, dude. I
really
know.
difficult to keep up. I've been reading Fence. Fence is a really cool series about a group of kids at a fencing. It's like a
Yes.
fencing team. It's really cool, kind of anime manga adjacent kind of book.
Hmm.
Oh, the book of Julie Wertz's book is called Impossible People, and a completely average recovery story. And a friend of mine just recommended Is Tsunaboshi, the graphic novel,
Hmm.
which I'll be reading in the next week or so. And my buddy Yehudi Mercado, who did he did Sci-Fu
Yep.
and Chunky. He just put out a DC kids book called Shazam Thundercrack, which is his version of like the Shazam, kids book. So those are some of the books that I am or have read recently. And one of my favorite authors, I've got a couple of books, Mark Russell. I'm reading a couple more of his books. The Billionaire Island book is one of them. So love Mark Russell. He did that Flintstones reboot a little while back. That was really cool. So yeah, that's more than you asked for, but
Hey,
that's
no,
it.
no. We're teachers. We sometimes we never have the straight answer. We always have to give you everything else that we know. So I guess one of the things I love that I've learned more about you in this, and I think that it's an interesting thing that you've brought up was how you parlayed your love for this stuff into your career as well. So for somebody, and this is more of like kind of like a double-edged sword in asking this, how easy was it for you or difficult was it for you to parlay getting to become on a director board, to do this stuff with the Comic Con, to become so enveloped into it? How easy or difficult was it for you, and would you recommend anybody that's interested in this to go down that path?
Um, well, I got involved in the shows as as an organizer and working for the company when the shows began. Like I've been working with Rhode Island since year one. I got wind from a friend whose husband is an artist and a comic book artist who I'd seen at local, smaller shows, who said, there's this big Comic-Con coming to Rhode Island. And I said, I'd love to do an educational panel at the show. So she hooked me up with the owner of the show. And that first year I programmed one educational panel. We were sandwiched between the Power Rangers and the wrestling panel. So it's like Power Rangers, then teachers and wrestling. And it was like a fantastic experience. And that following year, I decided, I was teaching. Obviously, this is going back about 12, 13 years. I was, fairly early in my career as a teacher. I was maybe 6 or 7 years in. And I said, I'd love to keep working with you guys. And he said, well, you're a teacher. Can you help us build out kids programming? So I helped them build a kids con, which I did that for a couple of years. And then I said, I want to do more. He said, why don't you take over the programming? So I became the director of programming my third year with the group. And now that's what I've been doing. It's, like I said, it's an amazing side kind of activity for me that allows me to be part of the backstage stuff that happens at these shows. Has given me the opportunity to meet a lot of artists and celebrities. Like I said, I have a weird life. Like one day I'm, at the end of the 1 year show, we're sitting in one of the panel rooms, just kind of me and my staff just talking. And then here comes Brian O'Halloran, Dante from Clerk. He's walking in. Hey guys. And I said, you're not even supposed to be here today. And he's like, shut up. And he sits down and then just suddenly I'm hanging out with Dante, and like, he's a buddy. That's kind of weird. Like that was a movie for me that was fundamental when I was in my 20s, because I was working as a clerk and I saw this guy in this movie Clerks, and when I got to meet Kevin Smith, it was like, stuff like that. Like I've had those types of opportunities, sitting down and having a conversation with somebody from a show that you like, Carl Weathers, just talking to Carl Weathers about the Sasquatch Gang, a movie he made that's a goofy, weird movie. And being part of that world, which is not really educational at all. Like I don't bring a lot of my educational expertise to that. It's a whole other set of skills, because we're not putting on educational stuff. We're putting on fan-based panels and, big property panels. Like I met Gal Gadot right before Wonder Woman, right? We had her at our show. And that's not, there's not a lot of educational, but it's not what we're there for. We're entertainers. If you're interested in being part of that, most shows will, volunteers are, you can volunteer for a lot of shows regionally and just go and work the show for free. And, you work it, you get a pass for the weekend, sometimes you get access and close up, opportunities to be near somebody that you like, or, at the very least, you get to be in the same room as them sometimes. And if you are ambitious and you want more, you can work hard and find your way into the staff. Shows are growing again now that the pandemic is over. We went from doing 2 shows to 7 and our company, and now looking to do more next year. So, I'm training up some staff to help me with I can't write 7 schedules a year and teach full time. So, I'm getting help from these young people, some of whom are former students that started as volunteers that are now stepping up into, staff level, doing real, run up work, not just showing up on the weekend of the show and, doing line control, but meeting with me multiple times during the course of the year and working out how these schedules look. We're building out anime right now, and that's been pretty daunting. So, yeah, I mean, it's a great, weird kind of path that I've taken in my life that landed me where I am as a full-time educator for 20 years, but also this guy that does a lot of work with local and regional comic shows. So, I love it. I mean, I've got SpongeBob's phone number on my phone here, like Tom Kenny's phone number for some reason. Never used it, never will, never showed it to anybody. But these are just the kind of the things that happen at these shows when you meet somebody, you have a conversation with them, suddenly they're texting you something and you realize, oh my God, I have their phone number. But you gotta stay professional, right? You can't take advantage of those connections.
Oh, of course.
I mean, I have been lucky, like, the the comic book men show with Ming Chen and Mike
Yeah.
Zapsik. Yeah, I'm close. I've met Ming and Mike many, many times. They have Skyped into my students and talked to them about, the show and being part of the industry. And yeah, it's cool. Like, sometimes you get those opportunities. One of the people that I had a chance to meet that I've gotten to be very close friends with is Tammy Stronach from The Neverending Story. She was the childlike empress at the end of of the movie. She's our age, well, she's in her early 50s, and because that movie was 40 years ago or something, and she was like 10.
Hmm.
She's got a little girl, same age as my son. I met her at a show that I wasn't working, and she came to one of our educational panels. We connected, and she's sat panels with us in New York. I brought her to Rhode Island. I had her moderate Millie Bobby Brown's panel at Rhode Island, and it went viral on Yahoo and stuff. And she recently reached out because she's got a new film coming out, and hoping that she has success with that. So little things like that. You never think. You grow up with these properties, these movies, these films, these television shows, and then now the people who made them or are in them. So if you're out there and you want to be part of it, find your local show, volunteer, show your initiative, and if they notice you, maybe you'll get a chance to do some management work, some real work. So that's
Look,
long
that's
answer.
hey, I love the long answer, but I think it's a good answer and it's a freaking awesome answer. So I know that I've met you through Facebook, but I want you to share out your socials. I'd like us to know more of where we can see not just your work, but the work that your company's doing. And hey, but if you guys are interested in me getting with Mike to go work on some stuff, that can happen. So Mike, let us know some of your socials. What do we need to know more about where we can find you?
You can find me on TikTok at Trying Teacher. Trying, like I'm trying, on Instagram, at a Trying Teacher. I'm on Twitter at Trying Teacher, although I don't do much with Twitter these days. I just started up a Threads account, at a Trying Teacher. It's connected to my Instagram account. LitX is, let me get that, is we have an Instagram account you can follow, which is, I'll have to figure out how to get to this here. We are LitX, at We Are LitX. That's how you can get to LitX. That's our educational cohort. There's going to be a Threads account connected to that very soon, and a website coming out very soon. As far as the work I do with Comic-Con, that's Altered Reality Entertainment. We have a Facebook. We have an Instagram. You could just search Altered Reality Entertainment. We also have the Contropolis shows, which we just finished our show in New Jersey. We've got one in Philly, and we've got one in Massachusetts. Rhode Island Comic-Con's our biggest show. You can Google Rhode Island Comic-Con, get connected to that, and see what we've got coming. Big year this year. Lots of big names coming to the show this year. For those of you that are in the region or want to do a little traveling, I would encourage you to come. The show is huge and it also feels like a small town show, but it's massive. I think that's everything. Right now I'm trying to make a go at this TikTok thing, and I've been doing a lot of book reviews and sometimes silly stuff on there. So I'm trying to get to 1,000 followers so I can go live on TikTok. So I'm at about 450 at this point. So anybody out there got a TikTok account at Trying Teacher, come follow me, and check out the LitX as well. We're going to be doing a lot of stuff in New York. So if you're in New York, look for us in New York. We'll be there.
You heard, folks. I want to get him to 1,000. So we're going to put this out on all my socials. Everybody else will share. I'll make it shareable so y'all can share it out. He's a great dude. I'm looking up right now. When's the date for Rhode Island Comic Con?
It's usually the
Is
first
it December?
It's November.
November this year? Okay.
It's always the first weekend of November. It is the 3rd to the 5th at the Rhode Island Convention Center in Providence. We actually have 3 buildings. We use the Rhode Island Convention Center, the Amica Mutual Pavilion, which is next door, and the hotel, Omni Hotels, where all the panels take place. So we've got 3 buildings. It's the biggest event in Rhode Island every year. Like I said, we're up there as one of the biggest in New England and the Northeast. We're contenders. Like we really have grown tremendously in the last 10, 12 years since we started doing it. So it's a great show. I love it, even though I don't get to see much of it because I'm busy, but I still love it.
So, folks, again, if you guys, I do have a lot of people that live in the area, like up in upstate New York, or that were willing to travel. Definitely go check it out. Like I said, Mike is definitely an awesome dude. Just getting to sit with you for this time and talk and just kind of pick your brain. I love it. And folks, if you guys are gonna look, I'm gonna currently, I was looking at dates. I'm going to talk to the wife to see if we can try to go up for Rhode Island, make it like a family trip, because it's something that if we can get in and actually get a chance to do a panel, I would love to do that, because I know my wife is not one that really likes to publicly speak, but I can do the speaking, and she wouldn't mind, because I have the gift of gab, as everybody that knows me knows I do. So that's something Mike and I will be talking about. And like I said, this isn't the first or last time you will be seeing him come on this show again. I'm going to try to bring him on again. And, I want you guys to just give it a shot. If your kids are interested in reading comic books, or they're interested in reading, just keep supporting that love, And if you notice that you got a teacher in the classroom that loves graphic novels, gift them graphic novels for their classroom that are appropriate, or ask. I will say that, ask, because sometimes the districts are very mean and they don't want certain things in the classroom. Like, they can look at Spider-Man and say he's not really a superhero, but then you can get like Miles Morales, the new Ultimate book, and like they'll be like, yes, put that in the classroom because it's great. So just be mindful. And at the end of the day, folks, reading is something that's very positive. You want to get your kids reading. My youngest at 3 loves to be read to. I just started something on my YouTube channel that is now blown up. As a joke, my wife said, you should read a comic book on YouTube. Just read a comic book. I broke out the microphone late Saturday night. I read it, recorded it, uploaded it on Sunday, and I've already had a lot of views hit it. And I was like, wow, it's been popular. So it's something that I'm going to stay doing. So if you guys are interested in getting to know Mike more, definitely follow him on his socials. He's a Facebook friend of mine, which makes him a friend of mine. And just again, like, this is not the last time. All right, y'all. So if there's nothing else, folks, I love you guys. Thank you for supporting us today and spending your afternoon with us. Again, Mike, thank you so much for what you do. More than anything, as a fellow teacher and a guy in the trenches with you, it's tough and it's a thankless job, but I think you bust your ass and you do it. And thank you for what you do. And like I said, I want to congratulate you on what you're doing and where you're going with this. And we will be collaborating more in the future.
All right. Well, thank you for having me. I really enjoyed this very much.
Anytime. And you're always, like I said, you're always more welcome to come back. And we don't have to talk teacher stuff, all that stuff. We can talk all like nerdy stuff. We can go. I love anything. All right.
I'm game.
All right, guys. Thank you guys for watching, and thank you anybody that's gonna be catching this on the replay. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. I'm gonna put all his socials in the video so you guys can be able to follow him and just stay up to date. I will put the dates for Rhode Island Comic Con in there, and I'll put some of the other stuff where he will be at. Thank you guys, and as always, my friends, stay geeky, y'all. Peace, love, and chicken grease.